Welcome to a special edition of Stories of Brisco and Bradshaw. I'm John Layfield, better known as Bradshaw, joined by my WWE Hall of Fame partner, the man who hired me many years ago, Mr. Jerry Brisco. And we have got a man that I am so jealous of. 1976, I watched the film In Search of Noah's Ark. I wanted to go to Mount Ararat. I wanted to live there. This man is living that dream right now. Andrew Jones, Noah's Ark Scans, has tours all over the Middle East of the biblical Exodus, about Noah's Ark itself. He lives by, if it is indeed Noah's Ark, the greatest archaeological find in the history of the world. He is Mr. Andrew Jones. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate the invite. I'm here to share what we're doing on this boat-shaped formation in eastern Turkey that we think it's the buried remains of Noah's Ark.
Andrew, that is so cool. There's so many things out there as far as biblical artifacts, that people either search for or try to give credibility to, from the Shroud of Turin to the Ark of the Covenant to the Cross of Jesus to several different things that are out there. Why Noah's Ark?
Well, I got interested as a kid. As you mentioned, you saw this film. Well, that was the year I was born. And so later on in life, I saw that same film too in my church as a little kid in the 80s. And I always was interested in the topic. My father had some books one was called The Ark File by Rennie Norbergen, and it even had photos of this site, this boat formation that they were thinking could be Noah's Ark or not. But then I met a guy named Ron Wyatt, who in the 80s was investigating this site. And as a kid, he came out, when I was a kid, he came out to Sacramento, California. And I met him later on, but I started this phone dialogue with him as a school kid, and I called his house and asked him so many questions. By the time I was in college, I went out here in 1997 and I saw the site for the first time, and I knew I wanted to investigate it and do more research. And finally, I moved out here. So.
Did he answer the phone?
Yeah, he did. So back then there was no
Uh,
internet. This is like
yeah,
1990 or 91. And so I
Yeah.
called 411. I said, "Do you
yeah.
have Ron Wyatt from Madison, Tennessee?" And the person, the operator said, "Yeah." And they connected me through. And I didn't tell my parents, back then it cost money to, do long distance phone calls.
Sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
at the end of the month, they saw the phone bill. They're like, "Who are you calling in Tennessee?" Because I was talking to this guy like every other day. I had all these questions. And, he was so nice to talk to a kid back then. But I asked a lot of questions about the site and other things. So it was awesome.
Andrew,
Yeah, well, Dad,
go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Jerry.
Don.
I don't want to jump
Don,
around, but there's so many things that I want to get into. There are so many different sites of Noah's Ark. There's the Ararat anomaly that's pretty much been disproven. There's the gorge just north of Iran, Ahura Gorge. There's so many things. Most of those have all been debunked, except for the Durupinar site that you're at right now. What got you initially to that Durupinar site? Did you know that these other sites, did you feel that these sites were not probably legitimately Noah's Ark and this probably was? What got you here?
Well, so as a kid, I was just, interested in archaeology. And I did read in these different books and these films of people saying, "Oh, we saw Noah's Ark up on Ararat." But, later on in life, I started studying more, especially in college, the geology of the area, and realized that Mount Ararat, where most of the so-called eyewitness accounts claim they saw it up there, is a post-flood. It was created after the global flood. It was a post-flood stratovolcano, just like Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier. So this type of mountain, this type of volcano is created after each eruption, it gets bigger and bigger. And so what we see today is after many, many eruptions. And for someone to say they found a perfectly preserved barge in the ice up there would be impossible. And right now it's open to tourism. So people climb that mountain. Thousands of trekkers around the world come here because it's the highest mountain in Turkey. And so they're climbing the mountain all over the place. You can even, use Google Earth and zoom in on satellite imagery, and no one has found this so-called ship up there. And so when I saw that there's a ship across the valley, and I heard of the work that Ron Wyatt and David Fazal did in the 80s, and I started talking to the Turkish scientists involved, like we partnered with Dr. Salih Bayraktutan, who's a retired geologist, professor of geology, and he really believes this is not a natural formation. And when you just look at the data, 300 cubits long, exactly how Genesis says, it's ship shaped. It's in the right mountains of Ararat. It just started, pointing me that hey, I should focus more on this and not chase, phantom arcs up on the mountain.
Yeah, and that's the same type of view as Ken Ham, who has the Ark exhibit in Kentucky that the Mount Ararat is a post flood happening because it's a volcano because so it wasn't there during the flood is what the belief is. But this
Yeah.
sighting that's here, the Durupinar sighting, this came from an Army officer, right, or an Air Force officer named after him. Correct? If you give us a little bit of background, maybe on Durupinar.
Yeah, so this site is not new. Some people will see videos and say, well, this was already in the news. Yes, it has been, but we're doing a lot of new research on this site. But the site was first discovered by a Turkish army captain who worked in the cartographer division of the Turkish military, and he was mapping out this area of eastern Turkey in 1959. And on September 11th, 1959, he discovered the boat-shaped formation, and within a week, it was in the Turkish news. And then within a month, they published the first photographs of the site from these high altitude photos that he was using to create maps. This was the year Turkey joined NATO. And so this part of Eastern Turkey was bordering the then Soviet Union. And so it was a very important area for them to map out and take photographs from the air. And that's when he discovered it, September 11, 1959.
And there's so many different sightings throughout history. Go back even further back than 475 BC, which was Berosus the Chaldean. Josephus, there's so many different people. Marco Polo. I mean, they have literally, history has been scattered almost every century with some type of sighting of the Ark. How do you reconcile that? Do you, I mean, it's hard to say because obviously
Yeah.
you weren't there, but do you think
Yeah.
that these people were seeing something or apparently
Yeah.
what do you think was going on?
Yeah, and I really think what they were writing about is the site. So, when people like Josephus, who lived in the land of Israel back, 2,000 years ago, he was writing right after Christ he was crucified and resurrected. So, 2,000 years ago, this Jewish historian was quoting other historians who lived before him. And so his record is a great, his books are a great document for repeating what other historians wrote. And all these people said that at a time in history, there were pilgrims and ancient tourists, just like today, who went to the remains of Noah's Ark. And he said that you could still see part of the Ark up to that time, and people were taking home little, Lucky Charms, talisman, and souvenirs from the Ark. So what that tells me is that the Ark, number one, was not fully because some people say Noah would have just taken it apart for wood after the flood, so you wouldn't even find Noah's Ark. Well, what these historians prove is that the Ark existed almost up to 2,000 years ago when they were writing these accounts of pilgrims seeing parts of it. So it matches this site being in the mountains, but not too far up, so people could walk by and see it. And the thing about Marco Polo, the Silk Road is right above this site. It was in these low mountains above the valley, and that route to China, which came right through this area. Even today, the tour companies will show you the ancient Silk Road where Marco Polo went along. And so, yes, his guides at the time pointed to the big volcano across, about 20 miles away. But when you're standing there where he was standing, you realize that they were just repeating something and saying, hey, maybe the ark is up there or something, because you can't really see anything from that distance.
And
Do you do
go
you
ahead, Jerry.
do you run into any resistance from the government there for your research at any time, or are they pretty cooperative? They want you to find new stuff, or what?
Yeah, it's both. So the government is not really into the search for Noah's Ark. But local professors are interested. Some will say, "Oh, it's just for tourism dollars." Maybe. But at the same time, even if their motivation is for tourism dollars to look for Noah's Ark, it is helping the economy. But it is also a scientific research trying to find and do research on this ship, or others are looking for another location for it. So it brings in the foreigners. No one so far said, nah, stop the research, or don't do anything. We have not gotten that type of negative feedback. It's always been positive dealing with the local government, and also, the scientists in this area, the professors of geology and history.
Was it hard to set up a business in Turkey? I mean, obviously, you're leaving your roots in America. You're going over to Turkey to follow this lifelong passion of Noah's Ark. Was it hard with the government? Was it hard with logistics and the things that you're doing now?
Yeah, I had to learn to slow down. I was originally most like half my life I was living in California, which is that fast-paced culture. All of America is this way, where you're always doing something, and if you want something done, you can just go get it done. Here, if you want to go buy something, you have to hit like three or four shops, and maybe they don't even have it. You have to go find another nearby town. There was no Amazon. I mean, there is an Amazon in Turkey, but it doesn't have all the stuff that you expect like you see in America. So you have to change how you do things and expect maybe it'll take a couple months to get a reply back from a government official. Yeah, life is slower, and I've learned to adjust that way. At first it was difficult to get the visas, to live there. It soon people knew who I was, what I was doing. I wasn't, doing something illegal in the country. In fact, when I did get my visa, they told me, "Well, you're the first and only American so far to be living here in this province." And it's
Wow.
the province borders Iran, so the arc site itself is about a mile from the Iranian border, so it's in a special military zone, but it's also a tourist site. So to have an American live here, they want to know like what's your motivation? Because most foreigners who do live in Turkey live in West Turkey,
Yeah.
like Istanbul, the biggest city, or these other towns on the coast with the Mediterranean Sea. And so have some foreigner living in like why here? Not everyone wants to go to California. You meet some local, they like take me to California or take me to America. They think the land is paved with gold, and so they want to get a job there, and they think you can help them. But my motivation was, I want to do this research and living right next to the site, and driving this 30 minutes from my apartment to the site it has helped a lot. You can get a lot done by just getting out of bed and getting into a taxi and going up to the mountain and meeting officials there or other scientists. So it's been great living there.
And a couple of
Do you still have the same passion when you get up in the morning when you're driving to this site? Do you, oh man, I'm gonna find something today? Is that passion still the same?
I know the first trip I did was in college in '97, and that was quite an adventure. We had so many funny stories, and we were just so paranoid that we thought we were going to get killed, and we heard all these horror stories of tourists coming out here and getting robbed. It was more of an adventure back then than it is now. Now I know I just call a friend, they have a car, or I call a taxi friend, and they can just take me up there. It's not that part is gone, the adventure part. But you never know. Like for the type of work, here's an example. When we were there this June, I had a tour group from Miami. Hispanic church had come out there, and he had about 22, 23 people were on the tour. And we're at the visitor center that the Turkish government built right above the site. And then just a random person came up to me, but it was an American, and he said, "You're Andrew Jones." And I was like, "Yes, and who are you?" And it was an older guy, and he said, "Well, my name is so and so," and he says, "I used to be a Coast Guard captain of two ships in my 30 or 40 years with the Coast Guard." And he said, "That out there is a ship. And that is how we design our Navy ship or our Coast Guard ship since the 1990s." And he started
Wow.
explaining like why it has a pointed front end and a rounded bow. And then he met with us over the next couple days during that trip in June.
Wow.
And then he later told me he used to be on the National Security Council for I think it was one or two for George Bush. I forget which one. But anyways, he had all this experience and knowledge. And so this is the example of being nearby and living there, where you can get up one morning and you either meet like a Turkish general or a student group from a local university or Taiwanese tourists coming through, or this Coast Guard captain who has all this knowledge about ships. And so if I lived in California, and this came out here on a tour once in a while, I could not do this.
at noahsarkscans.com, you can see all of the
Yeah.
tours that you have. And I saw some videos of some of the tours where you actually climb on top of the ship itself. And it's these people, you have people that were crying. It's a life-changing
Mm.
event for these people. You talk about being real close to Iran, and apparently that was part of the problem with the going and to trying to search for Noah's Ark for a while because Iran was so close, and a lot of it was closed down. How safe is it there in Turkey where you're at right now?
Yeah, it's safe. Many tour groups come through. Mount Ararat itself was opened for trekking tourists. What was that? About 2020, and then before that, people were going up kind of on their own. But for the last 5 and 6 years, they've had a lot of trekkers going up and down that mountain. So that's the main tourist draw because Mount Ararat itself is the highest mountain in Turkey. Then nearby you have Ottoman palaces, you have Urartu castles from like the Iron Age, and then you have this ship formation that we believe is Noah's Ark that's on the tourist map, and there's signage by the government saying, this way to Noah's Ark. So you have these four main tourist sites, and so many companies come out here, Turkish companies, American, Europeans, Asians, and no issues. It's kind of off the beaten path, but more and more tourists are coming out here, but there's not a safety issue. Near the border, you'll once in a while run into checkpoints. They'll be like, okay, where's your passport? What's your visa? Make sure you're not in there
What is
illegally or
Iran?
something. That is Iran. Yeah, it's right above. In fact, I do have a story where part of the research, we were investigating these border markers on the Iranian border with Turkey, and some had claimed that there were ancient inscriptions on the markers themselves. And so, after going back and forth with different officials, finally, one of the local archaeologists got myself permission for me to go into this no man's land area. And the permission was I could fly the drone into Iran and document these
Wow,
markers
that's
on the
awesome.
Iranian.
Oh,
Yeah, so I was here and I had it was nerve-wracking because I had my drone and the commander of the base here, the Turkish commander, was watching over my shoulder, and he had very specific instructions like no video, only take photos of the objects, not of the general border area. And he
Yeah.
was watching me, and I was thinking also, well, what if I lose my drone and on the Iranian side, what if they shoot at it or something? Do they know what we're doing? Like I didn't ask like all the permissions they got from each side, but it was okay. But that's part of the process of investigating this area for the remains of Noah's Ark is you sometimes have to go and fly a drone into Iran.
That's pretty
wow.
cool.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
been to Iraq and Afghanistan many, many times.
Wow.
Visiting the troops, during the wars and stuff. And
Yeah.
I got to fly over part of Iran one time. It's like oh my goodness, it's so
Oh man.
cool. That's where history all comes from. As far as the ark itself,
Yeah.
wood pretty much decays in about 4,300 years. So the idea is that the wood is petrified, right? And that's what some of the core samples it seems to have shown. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what you're seeing above ground is this earthen formation with there's different boulders, natural boulders had fallen in or come down with the ship from higher up on the mountainside. But our scans are showing that deeper in the site, there is patterns and structure that suggest that it's not just all decayed away. You're looking at, for example, 9 feet down, you're seeing parallel lines and perpendicular lines that you wouldn't see in nature. And then 21 feet down, you're looking at right angles, a whole series of right angles on the lower part of the ship formation. And then what was in the news this year, and we had the Today Show out here from NBC News, we were showing them the new scan results that shows these tunnels, which we believe are hallways that have not filled in with mud yet, that are still preserved deep in the ship, about 4 or 5 meters down. They start, and they're big enough that you could crouch and walk through parts of it. These like the central hallway down the ship, and it leads to a central chamber, which I call the atrium. So if you've been to the Kentucky Ark, they have a similar design in their ship. They have an atrium going down the middle, all the way down, that lets light and fresh air through the three decks. The Bible talks about that there were three decks on the ark, and so that's how they did their model for the ark, the replica. Well, we're seeing on the real ship that there was a similar functionality with a central room in the middle that goes down to, we lose the data about 40 feet, about 13 meters down is where we lose our data with the radar scans. So it could continue deeper, but it's a central room that's a squarish in nature, and these hallways or tunnels lead right to it. These are things that we believe show that there is still structure preserved deep in the soil. But yes, on the top, what we're looking at is mainly the chemical imprint, what's been decayed away. When you walk around, you're just going to see dirt and rocks. You have the ship shape. That's
And that
the right.
I'm sorry, I've been cut you off. And that was exposed from a hurricane. I'm sorry, from an earthquake around 78 or 79, right?
Well, actually, much earlier. So we talked to some villagers, and one of them he runs the visitor center for us. His name is Nuri, and his great uncle was alive as a kid. He's still alive, but he was a kid back in the early or late 1940s. And so it was either 48 or 49. He remembers when the ship shape first appeared after an earthquake. And then, so the locals don't know what it was, but he said before that earthquake, this whole mountainside was the terrain was smooth. They were, haying it. They had, they weren't farming it, but they had this natural grass growing. They would cut for hay. And then he said one morning they woke up after this earthquake, and the whole mountainside was rough. It just turned the whole side to this rough terrain with crevices and cracks, except for this ship shape. Then it was about 10 years later, 1959, due to aerial photography, that the Turkish military spotted it. It looks like a perfectly preserved shape in those black and white photos. And then it wasn't until I think it was the 68 earthquake that further dropped the soil away. And then in 1979, there was another earthquake that put a crack down the middle, and Ron Wyatt was able to get soil samples inside of it, which we've also did last year ourselves, and that was in the news this year about these new soil test results. But yeah, there's been a series. We're living in this area is a volcanic area, so you have two or three volcanoes, and it's a seismic area too. So it's like California. You have a lot of earthquakes there.
And one thing you show in your videos, noahsarkscans.com, is you show the ribs that are spaced about 9 feet apart, I believe is what I remember. So it doesn't look like it's something that is a geological formation. It looks like something that obviously had to be put together by something other than just the forces of nature, right?
Yeah, so you have a ship shape showing above ground, but then you're right. You have this pattern of, if you just want to be neutral, like you say protrusions, these rounded humps on the edges. And then when Ron took a metal detector over them, he was getting metal hits along that whole edge of the rim of the ship, you can call it. The soil has been changed inside. Our recent test results, where we took 88 random samples at 22 locations inside and out. It basically, using statistical analysis, we were able to show that inside the ship is almost 3 times more organic matter. So if you think about it, critics will say this is just a natural object that just randomly appeared on a mountainside because maybe dirt went around a rock and it formed kind of like a ship shape. So everything's natural. But here we're showing that the soil right inside this boat is different than right outside. And 3 times more organic matter. If this was a wooden vessel, like we're proposing it is, then as it decayed, it affected the organic content, the carbon content of this soil. And this is what our test results are showing. These are random locations we picked, and a Turkish geologist and an Australian soil scientist did this last year. And by December, we had the results, and we had it run by a number of people, including one guy who has a PhD in soil science. And everyone agreed. I even ran the results through. I was outside of Turkey when the results came in, and the Turkish scientist he sent me over WhatsApp like a very blurry photograph. I was waiting like for these results. I'm like, what? No, send me some clear photos. And finally, he sent me the PDF file, and I uploaded, just a whole bunch of numbers for each of the chemical things we're testing for. And so I ran it through a Chat GPT and Grok, and I'd see this thing. Hey, what would AI find out? And it matched. It said, well, these are the things that are different. Organic matter, pH level was different, and potassium, and everything else was the same. But those three were significantly different. And of course, then I sent the PDF file off to the scientists, and they picked the same thing because it's math, and so they would say, yes, these are the three things that are different. And then when you look at the data, when an ancient ship decays, they would affect the soil that way. The organic matter would be much higher. The pH is actually 8 times lower. Because as wood decays, it would change the pH of the soil, and then the potassium in the site is almost 1.5 times more. And in fact, I was just looking today. I thought, every couple of weeks there's a new version of these AI systems, and so I uploaded some of the data again. I said, okay, well, maybe it's better now. Tell me more. And I was doing this with Grok and ChatGPT, and I said, well, how would pitch? Because the Bible says Noah he waterproofed the ark using pitch, this tree sap. And I said, so how would that affect what we're seeing? And it basically said, this is exactly what you're looking at. If you have pitch there, you'll have a lot more potassium. The organic matter will be a lot more, and versus just having wood decay. And so it's matching the biblical account, which is very exciting.
And
Uh,
skeptics would say that that could also be a lava flow, a volcanic. It sounds like what you're saying is this could not be a lava flow that is volcanic, right?
Yeah, there is volcanic, but submarine volcanic rock there. There's no the nearest what do you call it, volcano is across the valley, 20 miles away or about.
Right.
So where we're at here is sedimentary rock. So layers that are laid down by water. You find fossils, coral fossils, fossilized coral, fossilized seashells scattered in this mountainside with sedimentary rock like limestone and sandstone. There is volcanic stones in there, like basalt, submarine basalt, which was exposed probably during the flood then, because this was, rocks that came up and were on the seafloor at one time. And so this is all mixed in this landslide. And some of it, yes, it has covered when the ark was covered by the dirt and by a landslide, it is inside of there too. So these scientists who say, "Oh, well, you have this type of rock inside your boat. How can you have that if this is Noah's Ark? You can't have submarine basalt inside there, or limestone that would be older than the ark. How's that inside the ark? Well, they don't realize that this whole landslide has boulders of different sizes that just roll down the mountain, and so
Right.
some of them have deposited into the boat shape. But
Right.
these soil results are showing that no, the soil is distinctly different inside versus outside.
The tunnels of
What
Hawara down in Egypt, they're legendary tunnels, they're supposed to exist. They do exist. And they figured out that they do exist. Some of them have been flooded because they're below the floodplain a little bit. But the government is very, very reticent to let people go in there and discover it more, And Egypt does not have the monopoly on inefficient governments, by the way. So we're here in America. We've got our own that they will rival anybody. But they're in Turkey. What is stopping you from getting whatever you need to do more research? Is there anything that you would love to do that you can't do?
I think it's a very tricky question because number one, it's a very fragile site. Yes, our scans, and we have more scans planned this spring and summer of next year that are even different type of technology that hasn't been used on the site. The ultimate result or ultimate goal is to get inside the site. Because we're seeing these cavities, these tunnels, and even outlines of rooms. What looks like rooms, or there could be support beams for the flooring. But whatever they are, there's a pattern down there of harder material, and then there are open spaces. Here's an interesting story. So this spring, because we had all this press, we had somebody contact us who had a lot of money. And I got an email from his secretary. I don't know who this person was, but the email had a link, and I clicked the link off of the guy's name, and it brought up a Wikipedia page about the guy, and it said, "Oh, he's worth like $5 billion or whatever." And I was like, "Oh," and then I told a friend who deals with this type of these type of investors or people, and he said, "Yeah, I don't think he's here to chit chat, Andrew. I think he wants to be a part of your project." So I have all your information ready. So I was like, "Oh, okay, well." So I made a somewhat of a budget and everything. But he called me. We did a video Zoom, so it wasn't a fake guy. And we talked about the project. And he was just asking questions. And then he said, "Well, we have this technology where we would like to, if you get a core drill into these voids, we can insert this device that will collect DNA." And this guy was involved with other, projects like this where you get ancient DNA and try to resurrect whatever the DNA is, the animal or whatever. And so he is interested. The talks are continuing, but this is the type of thing we want to get to. I don't think we'll excavate like a traditional excavation where we put a big hole in the site. The Turks are very reluctant to do something like that, but. There's been proposed maybe tunneling in from like the east side, which is the opposite side from the visitor center. So you can still, and it has a 30-foot drop there on the east side. So you can still do some type of work below ground and won't destroy the site shape. And the tourists can still take their pictures of the boat shape and then won't see what you're doing basically. So this is something we proposed, but we still have other things to do before you even get to something like that, where we want to make sure all the non-destructive techniques are used as possible, including we would love to do some of the same type of technology that was used on the pyramids in Giza. This year, some people made these wild
right.
claims, but the technology, it looks to be legit. I'm not a
Wait a minute.
geophysicist
Wild
or one of
claims
these.
about the pyramids. Stop it.
Yeah, no, it
We
really
know
was built
giants
by
built them. It
aliens.
wasn't aliens; it was giants. We know that.
Well, these claims are saying that there's this giant, substructure that goes down kilometers below the Giza Plateau, and they're showing all these, creative, or fanciful, or what do you want to call it, or legitimate, substructure graphics, that they got from their scans from the satellites. And I was like, well, let's. I found out the names of the company, and there's two companies that do this work, and so maybe we'll try to, if you have the funding, we'll ask them to scan this mountainside and see if they could see something below the surface here. But it's just another technique to use. We've used GPR, which uses electromagnetic signals to shoot into the ground thousands of times a second, and then you're able to basically, with the software these days, they can create a 3D model of the different types of resistant nature, what's below the ground, whether it's a rock versus a hole or versus soil. And same with ERT, which uses electricity to do the same thing. So these different technologies that the geophysicists bring in can be used here, and we want to complete all that process before you do something drastic and put a hole in the site. But that is the ultimate goal: is to get in there first, core drilling, getting a hole we can put a camera in, or the device that can collect DNA or organic samples, matter, and have them all tested at the laboratory.
Andrew, how has technology changed? I mean, you seem to be very excited about the future of technology on this site. When you first come over there, compared to what the tools you were using then and now, or can you compare the two?
Oh yeah, so like when Ron Wyatt and David Fowler were out here doing radar scans, it was like the first time radar was used in Turkey, according to the geologist Dr. Bayraktutan. He said this was the first site that they used GPR, which is ground penetrating radar. And back then, it was a non-digital method. They printed the results right there on thermal paper. And so you had this printout of what the radar was picking up below the ground. Now it collects the data, puts into the software, and then you can slice and dice it and filter it and send it off to other scientists to study. So it's completely different. And of course, technology is always advancing, as we know. And so it's exciting that maybe someday archaeologists won't even have to physically dig a site, but they could scan it with different techniques and create 3D models and etc. And so, we're going to get to that stage, but right now there's still a need to put a hole in the site, whether it's with a core drilling unit to get samples out, or later if we could tunnel in possibly. So that's the ultimate goal.
Well, Ron Wyatt was a very polarizing figure, and for some things, not necessarily Noah's Ark, but for the Ark of the Covenant, for the temple, the chamber underneath, some of these things did not exist. Does not mean it was a fraud. It means he could be wrong. Which happens in life and happens in science. What are your thoughts about Ron Wyatt?
Yeah, so I met him as a kid. I was very interested in history, and he was, of course, an adult and somebody I was fascinated by because he had made all these
Fascinating
claims.
character, fascinating person.
Oh yeah,
You can't quit
yeah,
listening
and it
to
was
him.
someone and he was willing to talk to me. I talked to David Fazal too, who worked with him on Noah's Ark. Sadly, both have passed away. But both these gentlemen through the '90s, these are people I would call, in middle school, high school, and then in college, I would call these guys and just talk on the phone about their work, and it's just so fascinating to me. But when we're out here now, when I'm doing some of this work, we're seeing stuff. Well, okay, we're improving on his theories about the site, or some things don't match up what he first theorized. It doesn't mean he lied about it. He just, we
Right.
have better techniques. We have more data now. That's science, and so it's not like we're trying to attack him. But yeah, there's some things that didn't match up to what he was claiming about the site. For me, I don't see any evil motivation on his part. He was out there trying to prove the Bible, and he was fascinated with ancient history too, and he had the funding, with his job to go out there and do it. So, kudos to him, because of his work in the '80s, and then coming out to California and doing a meeting. That's, how I got interested in the site. And then of course he saw it from Durupinar. He actually saw the Life magazine edition September 5th of 1960. That's how he learned about the site. So I think everyone's building on the past efforts, and there'll be people in the future that will do more on this site than we are doing today. So it's exciting. But for Ron, yeah, he very polarizing. Our goal is not to prove or disprove Ron. Our goal is to do more research on the site itself that Captain Druppiner discovered.
Yeah, and it's kind of like some of the guys, I like Emerson Hancock, who talks about ancient civilizations, and he's very much the same way. He says, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I think I'm right. Here's what it is. And he's just doing his
Yeah.
research, and he's one of these guys that if he found out he was wrong, he'd be happy about that because he found out what is right. And that seems
Yes.
like Ron Wyatt was doing. Doesn't seem like there was any malice there. It's just, when
Yeah.
somebody says
Yeah.
something and it turns out to be not correct or perhaps inaccurate, oh, he was a fraud. It doesn't mean he's a fraud. It means it could be wrong. We're wrong in life. Those things happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For example, like if you look at the boat shape, there's a big boulder in the middle. Critics claim that this is bedrock and that the mud went around it and created the boat shape somehow. Based on fluid dynamics, I can just put that criticism to bed because the pointed end is uphill on this ship shape formation, and so
It's
based
very
on fluid
important, right?
dynamics, the pointed end would be downhill. Based on gravity, as material builds up around, like liquid like water or mud builds up around an obstruction like a big boulder, the pointed end would be downhill, and the rounded end where all the material built up is uphill. And this site's the opposite. Well, Ron believed that that was actually bedrock too, but that the ship came down and impaled itself on this rock, and that's how it got stuck there. What we're seeing with the ERT scans done in 2014, with the GPR scans, and with Dr. Sally Tuton's just geological studies of the hillside, or the mountainside right there, it shows that this is a free floating boulder. There's two big, huge boulders right there. They either came down with the boat early on or they rolled into place, but that's not bedrock. Bedrock is much further below the surface. That's just an example where the early ideas about what this rock is and how it affected the site. They had different proposals, and now we're understanding more because we have more data.
What are your thoughts on that? And I know this hasn't to do with the discovery of Noah's Ark itself, but the story of Noah's Ark itself.
Hmm.
The Sumerian text is much older than the Genesis 6 through 9 recount. The Epic of Atrasis is also older. The Epic of Gilgamesh is also older. People claim that there was either some stealing back and forth, some plagiarizing back and forth. Perhaps it's the same story told differently. What are your thoughts about the historic views of different flood narratives from different civilizations?
Well, for me, it's very exciting because even though there are differences in the details, the overall idea and story is the same. That a family went onto a boat to be preserved through a flood, through this disaster, and so you have a different, as stories pass down through generation, you can see how things will change, especially if it's not recorded on video. Even today, you have these conspiracy theories where look at the JFK assassination or what happened
Yes.
recent times with other political figures. You have video, but there's many different ideas of what happened. So just think, when you had no video and thousands of years of stories passed down, each civilization would spoke a different language, had different beliefs and customs. Their story would change versus what we have in the biblical account. The difference is, I don't think it disproves anything. What it shows is that it was a global story about a flood that affected everyone, and so it's exciting at least to see that type of story spread around the world. Now, what's interesting about the biblical account is that it's a perfectly designed vessel. These other stories, they have like the vessel being round, this thing going around in a circle in a global storm,
and a
or they have a
cube and
cube, which,
and a cube shape
yeah,
in the Epic of
the
Gilgamesh
cube shape, and
would have not
of
worked.
course, yeah, in a storm you'd be like flipping upside down, constantly capsizing and turning around. But as this U.S. Coast Guard captain pointed out, this is a perfect design for and shape for a boat that you see on the hillside here. Actually, the photograph for those watching versus listening, I have the photo as my backdrop. That's the hillside that the boat shape is on, and so this design there it fits perfectly, and that's found only in the biblical accounts. So, as a Christian, I'm looking at the Bible as an inspired history, historical document, but also as the correct version, even though it was written later.
Well, we can tell you this from interviewing probably hundreds of old wrestlers from 20 and 30 years ago stories. They're not accurate about nothing, and they're not trying not to be. That's
Oh,
just
oh,
people
look
remember
at
stuff
fishing
wrong.
stories from your uncle.
That's right. We hear stories all the
even
time, and I'll say, Jerry, that didn't happen, did it? He go, no, we were there. It didn't happen. But they're
We're
not
there.
lying. They just don't remember right. It's
yeah.
and now you're talking about 4 or 5,000 years ago.
Thousands.
Yeah, and I think how much knowledge we've lost. These different. I was just thinking about this. I saw a post show up where they said one of the Assyrian kings had this library that and I forget the guy's name now. But when the Nineveh was destroyed because of the fire, it baked the clay, and so when the archaeologists came along about 100 years ago, they discovered all these clay tablets. Most of them are in the British Museum in London, and it preserves this ancient library that was lost. And so there are many other libraries through time and knowledge that has been lost because of war or natural disasters. And so even today, when something happens and you have like a warehouse that burns down and has like the government archives or whatever, you're like, oh man, we should have backed that up. Even
Right.
sometimes I have hard drives crash and you
That's
lose all
right.
your
Oh
data
yeah,
because you
you
haven't
wish
backed
those
it.
libraries that were
Yeah,
destroyed. So many old ancient
yeah,
libraries were destroyed. So much incredible information, and you look at,
yeah.
perhaps ancient civilizations like Emerson Hancock talks about. It's just there's so much lost to history. That it just happens with time. It just happens in short periods of time, especially over thousands of years. Ken Ham, and I keep bringing that up because I went to the exhibit in Kentucky. It's
Oh
fantastic.
yeah,
Is
yes.
is a biblical literalist, believes that the Earth is just a very short time, maybe 6,000 years old, based on genealogy from Genesis on, has nothing to do with the Ark. I'm just curious about your view. Are you a literalist like that believe that the Earth is probably a very short age, as compared to say 4.5 billion years?
Yeah, yes, as you can call me a young Earth creationist. For me, the flood story, it's difficult to accept a flood story as true and then find evidence for it and then say the Earth is billions of years old. To me, they don't match. Now, of course, then people say, well, how do you have all this old data and fossils? And so this is where science and faith, you can say if there's not, I don't know about a conflict, but there's definitely not matching up. And so as someone who believes by faith that the world was created by God and not evolved, and that the flood happened, was a global flood that destroyed everyone and only left 8 souls on a boat. It would be difficult then to reconcile that with something that, with traditional science saying it's much older. So I think the dating methods are wrong. Some people they hedge it. They say, well, it's less than 10,000 years because if you look at the Septuagint and other versions of the Bible, they give some dates are different for the genealogies you see in Genesis and the other books that have these numbers listed. And so it's very possible we could be 10,000 years old, but I don't, for myself personally, I don't see millions of years. So there are people who will disagree, and they're Christians, and the Pope and the others, they do promote evolution. They still are. They say they're Christians, and so I'm not going to attack someone for that. But for my personal belief, I believe that the Earth is young.
Yeah, we're not going to attack anybody either. It's your belief, and
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah,
prove either. So,
yeah. I
but
wasn't there.
crazy question,
Yeah,
crazy question. Were there dinosaurs on the boat?
were there dinosaurs on the boat? Well,
Yes, Ken
Dino.
Ham claims that there was. Now, I keep holding up Ken Ham just because he's the only
Yeah.
arc I've ever been to.
Yeah.
So that's why I keep. Not like he's the expert of
Oh
the
yeah.
world, but he has
Well,
a.
no, they do a lot of work promoting Noah's Ark and the flood and creationism. So yeah, a lot of people will quote from him. Well, so there is a belief that all the dinosaurs were on the ark. I don't think every single one. Look at dinosaurs today, or not today, but look at the fossil record today. What you're going to find out is some of them are just larger versions of. You have these giant creatures that were bigger back then. So as a reptile, these creatures, if they're living hundreds of years or before the flood, I really do believe that what the Bible says about the ages of man. They say Noah lived 900 and something years, things like that,
So
which
has Mr.
again,
Brisco, by the way.
I was there
well,
with
then
the
he could tell. So
dinosaurs.
were there dinosaurs on the ark? No.
That's right.
Yes,
He can
yes,
answer
yes, it
that.
was. Yeah.
He was
There,
fishing on the
So,
Dino,
lake.
Dino was on there, and all of them. Fred was
so
on there. Fred was
yeah.
his keeper.
So I do think that yes, there were larger reptiles. Now maybe they're small size. Someone said, "Well, the boat's only 515 feet long. How are you going to put a big dinosaur on there?" Again, we don't know how Noah, whether it's just like the eggs, they are reptiles, or they're just adolescent, small versions of all the animals. Maybe it was one of a specific type. So there's different views. It's very hard to know, and this is where that billionaire wants to find out, well, like what was there and maybe recreate it, almost like Jurassic Park. But they want to see what type of DNA we can pull out of the ark if there's evidence of the type of animal found there. So
So, well, what are your thoughts
Uh,
about? what are your thoughts about recreating something like that?
Yeah, it's on one level, and I grew up with like Jurassic Park movies, and so those are always great thrillers. And as a kid, you have nightmares later of the
Right.
dinosaurs being alive. But that's like, oh, no, what's the is it ethical to resurrect some of these extinct animals? Science will do their best, whether they're for whatever motivation to do it. I can see where you want to do it for something that got extinct 50 years ago. I'm not sure about something from thousands of years ago. If they would, because then the environment they would live in today, how would you control it, and what would it affect the whole ecological system? My personal belief is it's best to not do it, but on one level, I do want to see a dinosaur recreated.
Me too.
So
Yeah, I love that.
You are in the epicenter of history. Now, I got to be very careful here because Mr. Brisco is a Native American, so I can't say we don't have history in North America because they have a long history. Because he'll be very mad at
yeah.
me if I don't. But you have incredible the birth of civilization where you're at over there in Turkey, or very close to where it's at. What have you learned, not just about your biblical faith, but about Earth, about history, about things that you get over there, and being there is so different from just visiting. What have you taken away that was surprised you from being there?
Growing up in America and loving history, my parents would always take us on vacation somewhere, so we'd see the cowboys, the forts that the army set up in the West. We would in Old Sacramento. There's a whole Western town recreated there. You can buy stuff and walk on the wooden sidewalks and see covered wagons. In fact, my father's side, they came over to California, Northern California, via covered wagon from Texas. So you have that
I'm sorry.
100 1800s this history, but when you get to the Middle East and you get to Turkey and other places in Europe, you're seeing a lot more ancient history that's visible. So I'm not saying that there's not ancient history in America, but what you see over here, you're going to see a lot of stone structures like
Right.
castles, archaeological sites that you can walk in with everyone using stone. So what's amazing is how preserved and like you can go to a site and realize there's these OR2 castles that's where we get the name in English. Ararat is an ancient kingdom that was in this area mainly during the Iron Age. That later, in the English Bible we call it Ararat, but back then they were called by the Assyrians, the Urartians. These Urartu capital was nearby the Noah's Ark site, and their castles are all through this mountainous area. And so that's where Noah's Ark landed in the mountains of this kingdom of Ur-2. And you're walking through these castles, and you're thinking, wow, some guy lived here 3,000 years ago or 3,500 years ago, and they had their own life, they had their own issues to deal with, and now we're just walking through the remains of it. Now we build stuff like the strip malls. They're made of like
Right.
this wood, and you can change them every decade. They refresh to the look, but these are things that lasted all this time, and we were able to enjoy it or trying to figure out what they were doing there and who they were. So that's, to me, that's very exciting to be able to walk outside your door, get in a car, and within less than a couple hours journey drive, you're going to these ancient castles from the
Yeah,
time of the Bible, and Göbekli Tepe, which is they're saying is the first place, maybe temple in history, right? I would say right after the flood. Others, they're putting it way back, 10, 12,000 years ago. We take our tour groups down there because it's a fascinating site that's in the news a lot. This stone Tosh culture, they call it, because there's like 14 sites that have the same type of pillars with animals and people carved on it. And it's another mystery. It just shows that there's so many things that we don't know about ancient history. So I'm not going to, when someone proposes a theory, I don't go out there my way to attack it if it goes against what I understand for history, because there's so many new things we're learning every day. So it's exciting.
So go Göbekli Tepe, if it was built after the flood, which is the belief, a lot of people that believe in the creationist
Yeah.
view of the Earth being 6 to 10,000 years old, the pyramids, according to that, would be built after the flood, right?
Yeah, because so it goes back to flood plus geology. For those who believe in a global flood, that would lay down these sedimentary rocks like sandstone, limestone, and that later became hard rock. And so you look at the pyramids; it's built on a limestone plateau, and there are fossils in the rocks. If you walk around the pyramids, sometimes you can find fossilized seashells that's laying on the ground. The rocks themselves in the pyramid, most of the rocks are this type of limestone that they quarried, not the majority, but a lot of it. And so this is, I would say, building material that was created by the flood waters, so it cannot be older than the flood or before the flood.
Do you even care? And I don't mean to say don't care. Obviously, you do, but sometimes you don't want to prove something that is a matter of faith. Do you care in that respect? When someone says to you that there wasn't a global flood, that the ark couldn't have happened, how would you answer a person that would say that?
Yeah, we had the Science Channel out here, and the producer, they asked, I don't know if it ended up on the TV show, but there was a company, the Science Channel, hired from London, and all of them were agnostic or atheist.
Yeah.
They're there to do a job, but they were fascinated. They're very nice people. They asked me that same question, like, okay, what if you date your ark? They said, and it's like millions of years old. How would that just, what do you think now? Because you're saying that the Earth is young, much younger than that. And so those are things that I'm not sure. There's things that are mysteries out there, like especially this prehistory and things that happened that we have before the written record. Even the written record we debate. So for me, if someone says they don't believe in Noah's Ark or a global flood, I'm just hoping that what because I do believe in the story. So I think that there are actual objects we can find since it was an actual boat. So I hope that someday these people who have that belief system, they will change their mind, but based on what we find here, or whoever finds it. So
Sure.
Well,
Right.
what is your most convincing piece of evidence that you've been able to find that convinced people that it is real?
So here's an example. When you look at this site, it's like not I don't want to say a divine stamp, but it's if you look at the Babylonian account with the round boat or the cube shaped boat, but if you look at this site, it's exactly 300 cubits long. So what's the odds that you're going to find a ship shape? Yeah, there are other ancient ships out there, different sizes and different locations around the world. But what you're going to find here is a ship shape that's exactly the length given in the Bible in the right location, the mountains of Ararat. So in this mountainous kingdom, you find a ship shape, and there's no lake around. There's no evidence of water in modern times, or even in recent or history, you could say that was in this area. So how did the ship shape get there? That's exactly the length given by Moses in the book of Genesis. So for me, that's the clue that okay, we should be investigating this site. Now, it's not a perfectly preserved barge like the 1976 movie, film was talking about people seen on Ararat. No, what we're seeing is what's likely to be the case for a wooden vessel over thousands of years. It's decayed away, leaving its imprint with looks like to be fossilized or other type of structure, still preserved though deep in the earth. But what you're seeing above ground is this imprint of the boat where it's fallen away. And if you look at a great example would be some of the Bronze Age ships they excavate from Greek or Roman times later. What you see at the Viking burial ships in the Scandinavian countries, like in Norway, or the Sutton Hoo in England, which you can see in the British Museum, these artifacts. And I think Netflix made a film about that excavation that they did in the 1930s, where they excavated this mound. And it turns out at the bottom or inside this mound was this decayed. It was all gone. The wood was all gone, but it was a Viking burial ship, and it had the whole outline of the ship still there, with the iron rivets still in place, but the wood was all gone. And of course, it was full of treasure. But this is what we would expect for a wooden vessel. If it doesn't fossilize and get petrified, then you're going to expect to find basically a chemical imprint or the shape of it only. So this is what we're trying. So we're very careful in the research, and we're trying to apply technologies that would pull out that type of data from the soil.
One of the most fascinating shows that we were privileged to do, next to this one, of course, was that we had the Shroud of Turin expert on. And there's just certain things you can't explain. The negative image, you
No.
can't explain that with medieval tech or even with tech today. I don't know what that means, but you can't explain it. It's nuts. All of this,
Yeah.
the people that are looking for Christian artifacts from an Axum, Ethiopia, that looking for the Ark of the Covenant to the Holy Grail and stuff. What are your thoughts about other? Do you talk to them? Do you talk to somebody that's looking for the Ark of the Covenant? Do you talk to somebody that's looking for trying to prove the Shroud of Turin? Is there
Yeah, yeah.
consensus there where you sit there and talk and go, "Here's what I'm doing. Here's what you're doing. We're all doing the same thing for the same reasons."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we do have a secret Zoom meeting we do once a week. No.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I knew it.
No.
We need a link to
Yeah,
That's
that.
right.
you'll
We gotta
have to
have a
know.
link for
Yeah,
this.
you'll have to know the passcode. But so it's interesting because you do when you start doing this type of research, and you run into, of course, other people doing whether similar or outlandish, in my opinion, type of research, whether it's aliens or whatever. But it's interesting because they have the same passion. They're trying to prove something they believe in, and they think they have the data to prove it a lot of times. So just like myself. But here's one interesting story. I got in contact, or this rabbi emailed me, and they asked me to go to a mountain in Saudi Arabia that they thought was Mount Sinai that was different from the Ron Wyatt site. And so I went there and took pictures, and then they in the press they said this Gentile researcher, they called me, they were Jewish, was the only one who's seen this mountain, and the first one in modern times. And then a couple years later, they emailed me again. They said, "Hey, we're trying to look for the Ark of the Covenant up on the Temple Mount." And this was because they were believing Jews. They didn't want to, they're not Orthodox. I don't know if he was Orthodox rabbi, but anyways, he didn't want to go up on the Temple Mount himself because of the belief that they could walk too close or over the most holy place where the temple used to stand. Plus, it's very political. There are Jews that go up there. So I'm not sure
And
how it
plus,
all
according
works,
to the
but
Bible, a man just put his hand up and he got melted. So
Yeah.
there's reasons not to get close
yeah,
to it.
yeah. And so they sent me.
That's right.
So
Let's send the Gentile.
Yes,
Yeah.
the Gentile researcher who was willing to take photographs with a drone in Saudi Arabia. Let's send him to the Temple Mount. And so that just happened this last winter, last year. And so I was there in Israel guiding the tour, and this guy's email came in. I said, "Well, I just happen to be in Jerusalem right now." And so they asked me to document some features above ground, just walking around. So I made a bunch of trips up there. One time I was questioned by some security, like Israeli security, because I got too close to a Jewish tour group, and they wanted to know what I was doing, who I'm with. And so it was all good, but everything's very. You feel like everyone's watching you, and you're trying to be a tourist. And so I'm just using my iPhone and other little cameras to take pictures. And once we located the area this rabbi thought the ark was buried in, then his next question was, "Can you get permission from the Palestinian Authority there to go into that area?" It was a water cistern, and they wanted. And then he said, "Bring in a secret metal detector that's like under your clothes that could determine if there's some gold
Yeah,
up."
sure.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, one step at a time." I took your photos.
Yeah.
And let me think this through. So I haven't. I said, well, actually, when he emailed that next part, I was already out of the country. So I was honestly could tell him, well, I'm not in Israel right now, so I can't help on that part yet. But it's interesting that there are people out there just like Ron Wyatt looking for the Ark of the Covenant or other objects that are sacred or special or had special powers. Look at the Indiana Jones movies, kind of like that. But so I had my little adventure last winter helping this one rabbi out.
That's incredible. I just love stuff like that. I think it's so cool that people have this passion for it and then follow through like you have done. What is not necessarily next, but is there anything other than Noah's Ark that you're interested in? You're over there in the cradle of history. You got so many great things around here. Is there anything else? And you're also doing the Exodus tours, noahsarkscans.com. You can find all this stuff. But is there anything else that you're interested in? Maybe not as much as Noah's Ark, but second, I'd love to check that out.
Well, so we're still doing the research, and of course, we do tours because people like to hear what we're doing for the Exodus route in Mount Sinai in Arabia, and there are other groups out there doing the same thing for not really on Noah's Ark. We're the only group focused on that site doing this research, but for the Exodus tours, there are other companies doing tours, and there are other researchers out there and pastors. So that's great. I'm just trying to figure it out. And that's actually one of my favorite topics is the Exodus, because like a big mystery. It's a logical puzzle to put together. Where did the Israelites walk? Like what valley they went down and what route they take, and which mountain was Mount Sinai. So I was, when we first got to Saudi Arabia, it was in 2016. And at that time, Saudi was closed to tourism. Now it's open. But at that time, between 2016 and 2019, you couldn't get into Saudi Arabia on a tourist visa. So we actually had a friend of mine met a Saudi prince, which was another amazing story I could tell another time. But this prince gave us all business visas. And with Americans, they have some agreement where they both sides give each other long visas. So we got a 5-year multi-entry, 6 months at a time visa, so I could spend like half the year there if I wanted to. And so I was making all these trips. I said I'm going to take advantage of this before they, cancel my visa. And so I was going to Saudi Arabia a lot, and checking out this mountain that Ron Wyatt had discovered called Jebel Makla, or Jebel al-Lawz in northwest Arabia, in the ancient land of Midian. And so that was a very, besides the Noah's Ark. So here's how it works in my life right now. In the summertime, when it's too hot to be in Saudi, I'm in Turkey where the snow is gone and you can do research on the Ark site. And so then the winter months, when there's snow on the Ark, too cold to live there, I go south like the birds, and I do this research in the Middle East, like Egypt, Saudi, and Jordan, where
Wow.
you're trying to figure out the Exodus route and do these tours too. So that is my passion. There are some side things I would love to somehow tie in and figure out this mysterious, the Tash culture in Southeast Turkey, where they are finding Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, these other, tepes meaning hills. These sites that's a brand new, new Stone Age, Neolithic culture, and fit it into for me, a biblical narrative of a post-flood culture as as the people spreading around the world. Somehow there was a culture there that are creating these massive stone pillar sites and living there, and who knows, why are they carving animals on it and other figures, and so that's in Turkey, so I can I can do that easily and drive down to that site. So that's another passion. There are other sites that just mysteries I'd love someone to figure out. I'm always watching the pyramid, the news about the pyramids, because Zahi Hawass, the famous Egyptologist in Egypt, there he has promised that next year there's some big announcement he said will change our understanding of ancient Egyptian history. He's great at PR, so I hope it's not just overblown, and I really do hope that there's something amazing, which I think there will be. So things like that gets me excited, and I always check my Google News or Apple News for stories about archaeology.
One of the greatest.
You're,
Go ahead, Jerry.
you're in Jordan right now. Are you
Yeah.
working on a project in Jordan now?
No, actually, I'm on a little break. That's why I
Oh,
told your friend that I could help you guys this week and do this.
great.
We're so glad you did.
We're thrilled.
Because I have a tour group going on, but another guide's taking care of them this week, and I meet up with them again next week, and then we head into Israel actually. But yeah, in Jordan, there's something interesting I still want to go see that they announced this year. I think it was this cartouche, which is the royal name of the pharaoh in an oval shape. And they found this cartouche of the pharaoh Ramses III, who was from the 19th dynasty. So in my 19th dynasty. So in my belief, that's after the Exodus. But what's interesting is that I saw his cartouche also in northwest Saudi Arabia, and there's a belief that his men who are doing this, like following a trade network or like a natural highway between Egypt and the Saudi Arabia or the Arabian Peninsula, marked the path by putting the king's name all on the rocks. And they just found his name here right near Aqaba, near the border with Saudi Arabia. And then the other one was found in, I think it was 2010. The same pharaoh, his name was down in northwest Arabia. And for those who are looking for Sinai in Arabia, like a Jebel Makla, we believe that Moses fled along this ancient route between when he killed the Egyptian and then fled Pharaoh. He went to Jethro's home in Midian, who was the priest of Midian, and he fled along the natural, this trade route that was between Egypt and Arabia. And this trade route later, hundreds of years later, was marked by the Ramses III men. And so that's something that was just near here, but they say it takes a lot of effort to get out. Like you need a 4x4 Jeep, and then you got to hike through like sand dunes for a bit, and then you can get to the site. I don't know who found it, probably a local Bedouin, but then his cartouche is carved right there on a boulder. So it's a small thing, but it's very exciting, and it's something that I'll document someday. So yeah.
One of the best trips I've ever had was I went to Turkey, and I got to go to Ephesus and Troy and several things just south, and also got to see the Blue Mosque, of course, everything you do, the tourism in Turkey. I was trying to look at your NoahArtscans.com, your tours. How do you get to, where do you fly into, and where do you stay when you're there? Because the tours look very reasonable as far as price. And when you see the reaction of people, I mean, it's just life-changing events for people that are standing there on what they believe, and many do believe, is Noah's Ark, built several thousand years ago, that saved the world. What's the route you get there? Where do you stay? And things like that.
Yeah, so if those who now this not a disclaimer, but I do if someone shows up on their own, I do that many times. I go out, they'll send me a message say, "Hey, I'm at the site, or I'll be there tomorrow. Can you come show me around?" And I'll do it for free too. So if I'm in the area, I'll say, "Okay, yeah, I'll tell you what the research we've done there." But for those who do go on a tour, we do have tours listed on noahsarkscans.com. And what they do, they fly into Istanbul. That's your gateway city. It's the biggest city in Turkey. And then you spend overnight there by the airport. The next day, you have to do a 2 hour flight to Eastern Turkey. Turkey is a very big country, but it's cheap domestic flights. It's like cheaper than Southwest tickets sometimes. And so you can then take this flight in, and you land at the city. It's called Idr or Igdir, if you want to pronounce it the English way, which is right beside Mount Ararat on the north side of the mountain. You can see the Ahura Gorge on a nice day. So that's the airport we usually fly into. There are two other nearby airports in Agri, the province capital where we're at, and then Van, which is a couple hours south. The capital city of Urartu is there. But we usually fly into Igdir, and then we start working our way south. Then we stay in Doğu or Dogu Bayzet. That's the town at the base of Mount Ararat where all the Ararat climbers stay in. That's where all the tourists stay. So that's the hotels. And that's where my apartment is. And it's 30 minutes from the Durupinar arc site. And that's our base while we're there. Now we have options to those who are already in the area. For like we have a 3 day tour. Usually people do a 5 day or the 12 day. The 5 day is just Noah's Ark and Urartu sites. And then the 12 day we go all the way down to Haran, where Jacob's well is, and right near the Syrian border, like 10 miles away. And it's right near Şanlıurfa, which is the site for Göbekli Tepe. And so that's kind of where we end our tour on the 12 day one. We kind of make this journey through southeast Turkey. You're seeing a lot of historical sites. We see Assyrian church sites, the Assyrian Orthodox Church. They still read and teach and do their prayers in Aramaic, a form of Aramaic. So that would be the language that Christ spoke, that they've preserved all these thousands of years. And we also see like a lot of prehistory sites, Göbekli Tepe, other Neolithic Stone Age sites, and then Urartu, the country that Noah's Ark landed in. We see a number of their castles. Then we hit up a New Testament history. There's a traditional burial place for the apostle Bartholomew, who was the apostle to the Armenians and this area of the world. And about 2 hours or 1.5 hours east of the Van, where the Urartu Castle and capital city is, there's this church that's ruined now, but that's where they believe he was martyred. And so we show tourists some New Testament history there. I mean, there's lots. A lot of people don't realize Haran, which is in Turkey. 11 of the 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes, the founding of these 12 tribes, 11 of them was born in Turkey, modern day Turkey. And only Benjamin, the youngest, he was born on the way down, or I think it was near Bethlehem. He was born in the Promised Land. But so you have this history of the start of the nation of Israel, the family line of Abraham from in the area of Turkey. So it's very fascinating to be down there and see this ancient history that's really close to these other sites that are very mysterious, the Göbekli Tepe areas, and it's realized that right before Abraham, there was this culture living there that's very mysterious. And so you see, also we take you to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And so, that's associated with a lot of prophecy, especially mainly the Euphrates River within the book of Revelation. And but it was, a very biblical historical river from the Garden of Eden, which mentions Euphrates, all the way down to the book of Revelation. So it's this is all hit up on a 12-day tour, and you see a lot of sites with different time periods.
Wow. So last question. You've been so generous with your time. What left do you have to do? What do you want to accomplish there before you get done? And are you going to stay there?
Yeah, I didn't plan to be here. What happened when I was visiting a friend at that time, it was February, and I was about to fly to Saudi, and this is 2020. So in March, the pandemic really hit, and they closed the borders in Saudi. Thankfully, right before my tour was going to leave. And so I told all the tourists, change your flights, cancel, don't show up because Saudi Arabia closed the borders. But I was in Turkey, and my friend said, why don't you just stay here? The year before I actually overstayed my visa in 2019, and because I was doing all this work. That was the year that the Science Channel was there. That was the year we did the GPR scans, and so a lot was happening in 2019. And then also Saudi Arabia opened for tourist visas, so I had a Mount Sinai tour that December. So when I'm here in Turkey or there in Turkey, my friend said, stay here. You could do a lot with meeting the locals, getting to become friends, figuring out what you want to do with the site. And so that really helped. While others, there's one or two other people try to do work on the site, but they're doing it from remotely, trying to get contacts and doing things, and nothing ever happened. But living there has been the key. And so I was able to befriend the locals and help. Actually, not to pat myself on the back, but we helped a bunch of people who were key locals who during the pandemic they needed food. There was no tourism dollars going through the area, no tourist groups, so they were broke and hungry, and so we were able to actually buy groceries every couple of weeks. We'd fill a taxi full of groceries and drive out to some of these people who have helped us with the artwork. They're locals. And so, I think, God put me in the right place at that time. I don't know how long, I didn't plan to be there. So I don't know how long I'll be there, until the work is done. I don't miss the life of California. I really do like living out here, whether it's, that country or another one. The dollar goes a lot further by living also in Turkey versus California. But yeah, and I love the tours. You're meeting a lot of people who are from around the world, whether it's my group or some other group. I'm just there to give a lecture. But these are people from all different faiths and backgrounds, whether they're Turkish Muslim tourists or atheists or agnostics or Buddhists from like Taiwan or Japan, but they're there on a cultural tour. So you can tell them about the story and the evidence and what we're doing. And it's great getting a selfie with the Japanese tourists. I didn't know that it was a big thing, but they would, after my lecture, they all came up and every single one of them wanted a selfie with me. And I haven't, I'm not a movie star, so I was very surprised. I wasn't expecting something like that when I'm just talking about radar and soil test results.
So when you say when the work is done, what signifies that?
For me, it would be going into the ship, whether it's core drilling and putting a camera in and getting samples out, or tunneling in, or maybe a traditional excavation, but getting down into where we're seeing on those GPR and ERT scans, the levels there, deep in the matrix and the soil that would show right angles, a floor. Let's say we come down to the area where it's like 9 meters down, or not 9 meters, 9 feet down, and we find a flat floor, and there's a wall right there, and then there's a door frame, so that's preserved. You take all the mud matrix out, and you have this perfectly preserved room. That would definitely show it's not a mud going around a rock on the side of a mountain. So right now someone could look at our GPR, and there's always someone saying something, so they could say, oh, okay, you have right angles, but maybe that's just right angle rocks down there. I'm just saying you could say anything with the GPR if you don't want to believe that you're finding natural versus man-made objects. So we think with the soil test results and what we're doing with the GPR and non-destructive work, we're proceeding to that point where the Turks will let us do more. And so we just got to get done with what our current non-destructive work is. And so that's our goal, is to get into the boat. I think that would be, you're not going to find a sign that says made by Noah and Sons. Who knows what he put on the ark? I don't think there'll be a plaque on the side saying Noah's Ark, like they name ships.
I guess all his kids etched their name into some of the cages
exactly,
somewhere,
graffiti, like day 150. I can see on the
That's
wall.
That's right. You see like 365 days on crossed off, and
still raining. Still raining.
Yeah,
still raining. Still smelly animals.
That's right.
Yeah, but I think with these, as I mentioned before, that key signature is this is the right size. So now, okay, you have the right size. Let's get inside there and show that there are rooms and there are levels, floors. And then I think that would be for me, that would be okay. It's finished then. Okay, this is if you don't want to believe it's Noah's Ark, then it is some boat that's the exact same size. So
right.
And last question for me: is there any other site that has credibility like this site here?
And this is what I tell people. I say, if you can find a better site, just like the Mount Sinai site we're researching, like the best candidate for me is Jebel Makla in Saudi Arabia. And until someone shows me another mountain that fits the biblical criteria. Same with Noah's Ark. If you can find another site that you can get up to and we can do research on that matches or has evidence of being a boat and the right length and right location, not in China, but like here in the mountains of Ararat or Ararat, then I would look at the evidence. So this is the only site where you can actually go up to and do the research on and get these type of results. When we did the radar, we did the soil test. These were done like the soil test with just random samples. We didn't force those results that show 3 times more organic matter. We didn't know what would be in the test results. When the university lab gave us the test results back, oh wow, it gives us more evidence that this is an ancient, decayed, buried ship there, a wooden ship. And so, and that's for me the key is that we have a site where we can research. Everyone else has theories or stories, or the dog ate the evidence. So and so had a blurry photo of the ark up on Mount Ararat from 50 years ago, but no one can find it ever again. So I think we have the best candidate, and we're proceeding with the work. People do what they want, and the other. Ark hunters, other groups, and we're not trying to, hurt their work. We just focus on what we're doing at this site. Yeah. And I just want to mention that people would like to follow the work. As we have the noahsarkscans.com website and our Discovered Media YouTube channel. But on the Noah's Ark Scans website, we do have email newsletter they can sign up for. We're not as good at getting out email updates. We do a lot of YouTube shorts, but if they sign up on the website for the newsletter, then they can keep updated on whether it's tours or the research itself or any breaking news. So. Yeah.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much. We've kept you forever, and but I could talk to you for hours about this. I'd say this is just absolutely fascinating. I'm so jealous that you're getting to spend your life doing this wonderful work. This is so fun, and you're such a pleasant human being. I look forward to meeting you sometime. And thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, don't be surprised if John and I show up at your doorstep one time.
You bet. That's right. You better
no problem. If you wanting to sleep on the ark, with the animals, no problem. We can arrange it.
Okay.
We've slept in worse places. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.